Is there a reason nobody's talking about this film? Let's get into Greg Swinson's first film in 16 years with Hunt Her, Kill Her. A janitor in a furniture factory finds herself in a fight for her life when she becomes the target of sinister masked intruders. Let's start with the directing here. As always, Greg Swinson takes charge of the directing and writing alongside Ryan Thiessen. As for the basics, yes, these guys can put together a film that works overall. There are some absolutely huge glaring issues within the film, but for a film of this size and scale that hasn't been pushed out to the public, I was delivered nearly everything that I was expecting from this viewing. I feel like the complaints that I have from a directing standpoint all come down to one major issue. My issue is that our protagonist Karen is being stalked by 4 men. She ends up killing one of those men, but then we end up still seeing her be stalked by 4 other men throughout the rest of the film, alongside one other attacker that's watching the outside of the building. We don't ever receive an establishing shot of all of the attackers together, so it's kind of hard to decipher how many attackers there truly are, and I just feel like there's not really an excuse for that. But overall, it was technically well done and remained mostly entertaining throughout. Moving on to the cast and the characters, I would say the cast is fine, but the characters overall are written to be pretty flat. Karen is obviously our most developed character because she is our protagonist, but even then, with the dialogue that she's given, it doesn't do much to create a new lively final girl. And as for the attackers, I would say everybody does a fine job considering they are masked 99.99% of their screen time. Moving on to the story, but specifically the script is where I have most of my issues with this film. I feel like Karen escapes death way too easily. There's about 6 times where I truly felt like, yeah, this character should probably end up dying, be stabbed, whatever it may be. It's just a couple instances where you're like, okay, that's not the world that you're setting up. And so it felt like certain things should have happened based on the way that the earlier, I guess, half of the film had already gone up to that point. Also, I'm not going to go into spoilers because there's practically nothing to spoil. And I say that because the twist reveal, if you can call it that, is set up so extremely obvious within the first 10 minutes. This led to slight boredom throughout the rest of the mayhem of the film because I knew exactly who was attacking, why they were attacking, and it just was obvious. It just made for the ending of the film to be so glaringly in your face. It was just like, I know exactly how this is going to end, whether or not certain characters get stabbed, wounded, whatever. You just knew who was going to survive, who wasn't, and why everything was happening, all within the first 10 minutes. So that was the one thing where that twist should have been held off, but even then, it wouldn't have been that great of a twist because we've seen it time and time again. Now, moving on to the visuals, I would have to say the visuals in this film are actually my favorite aspect. Overall, this film looks really, really good, especially for the budget. I'll get my complaint out of the way, and that's just that all of the outside shots look extremely flat, and they don't look consistent with the color and tone of the rest of the visuals inside of the warehouse. But other than that, those are like my only complaints about this film visually. And as for what I love about the visuals, that opening sequence was fantastic because it brings the audience through the location that you're going to be in for the next 90 minutes. And it really does a great job at showing you what's where, what items this person may or may have to use against these attackers. I just really thought that opening shot, that opening sequence, that's probably where they spent a lot of their planning and their money when it came to cinematography, but that's okay because it worked and I was intrigued from the get-go with that opening sequence, as well as the music within that scene. And that transitions into the score for Hunt Her, Kill Her. Overall, the score was really well done. And like I said, the score that tagged along with that opening sequence was really, really well done, really intriguing and interesting. It just kept me engaged with the visuals that I was watching. As for the rest of the film, it essentially was overall kind of basic, but I just feel like it worked within the story that we were given. Again, I can't remember too much of the score throughout the rest of the film. I do really, really heavily remember that opening sequence, but as for the rest of the film, I can't quite remember it as much detail, but it still was overall effective. I think at the end of the day, the score was really well done, and there was nothing about it that felt off-putting or took me out of my viewing experience. Moving on to the final thoughts and spoilers for Hunt Her, Kill Her. Overall, Hunt Her, Kill Her was a fun film, I guess, at the end of the day, but it is also a film that I will most definitely forget here within a couple of weeks. But that's not always a bad thing, and I definitely think that's the case with this film. They weren't trying to make something, like Inception. I know that's an awful comparison, but they're not trying to be the next Scream. They're not trying to do anything drastically new. They were just trying to basically show what they can do, make a tense film, and I think at the end of the day, they achieved that. I do think since the plot was so predictable, the film could have really benefited from having more interesting and unique kills. I do think the plunger kill was awesome, but that was also used within the first 30-40 minutes. It was one of the first kills that you do see, and it is easily the most entertaining sequence of the film. So when you do that right out of the gate, it just makes everything else after that feel a little bit weak. This film isn't great, but it's not terrible other than some cringy dialogue and a very predictable plot. All that being said, I'm still really surprised that this film hasn't been marketed what seems like anywhere. This is a film that I would have happily seen on Shudder, and I think a lot of people would have had a really fun time watching this on Shudder. Yes, I had a good time seeing this film in theaters, but I think majority of horror fans would have wanted to watch this film at home, and this is definitely a film I recommend watching at home. You don't need to go to the theater to experience this. This is definitely a one-time watch, but that being said, I wouldn't shy away from watching this film. This is a film that I would possibly watch again if somebody hadn't seen it and was dying to watch it. Yes, there are other better options out there, but again, this was an easy, fun watch, and I enjoyed it. But like I said about the film's marketing, I wouldn't have known about this film if it weren't for the Regal Unlimited app. I pay monthly so that I can go see whichever films I would like to see, and I didn't know that this film existed until I saw an ad that said Hunt Her, Kill Her coming out this week. So I found out about it the week it was releasing, and Greg Swinson and Ryan Thiessen, the writer-director combo for this film, this is their first directed film in 16 years. So you just think that they would have marketed the film a little bit. And yeah, I'm happy that they got a theatrical release, but I don't think that's where they would have benefited the most. But that's it. Those are my thoughts on Hunt Her, Kill Her, written and directed by Greg Swinson and Ryan Thiessen. Let me know, have you guys heard of this film? Have you seen it? Will you be watching it now that I mentioned it to you if you hadn't already heard of it? Just seriously, I'm curious how many of you either have or haven't heard of this film. Please let me know down in the comments below. But thank you guys so much for watching. I'm Carter Scotland Allen, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.